So this is Louis, and for today I thought I would revisit one of the topics I have in the past. And honestly, this is the kind of video where it would be me scripting things out a little bit more and then spending half an hour talking about this. But I already know that, unfortunately, on the topic of pornography and obscenity, there's no real point. Because the people on the other side of this are hysterical. I'm not really sure how else to describe it. We're going to talk about Lauren in this a little bit, but it's just a matter of, as always, give a woman a chance to actually be principled, to actually be consistent, to actually live up to all of her fucking rhetoric, her endless meandering about freedom, about liberty, as she works for liberty this and works for freedom that. Just go look at her fucking profile. You'll see she works for liberty this, works for freedom that. Give her the first opportunity, just one, to live up to those standards. And of course, if it comes to pornography, it's a woman we're talking about. So reflexively, it is prohibit it, it is federally ban it, and it is jail pornographers.
Really, nigga?
Why? Ick. It's the ick factor with women, whether it's her or Lindsay Shepard. No consistency, no actual basis for reasoning. It is simple, women hysteria, where reflexive, just, I don't like this, therefore. And every other fucking word that has come out of your mouth goes into the garbage bin. What an embarrassment for you to fall down so easily as it relates to this. And if I'm wrong, if Lauren doesn't agree with the position that pornographers should be jailed and that pornography should be federally banned, perhaps she should elaborate on what her position is. And keep in mind the years and years and years of horse shit that has come out of her mouth related to all of the concepts that she's put forward and that all the organizations that she works for that spew the rhetoric of freedom and liberty. If you are not free to take a nude picture of yourself and put it online or sell it to another person, if you're not free to do with you, if you don't have bodily autonomy, then what do you have? I mean, I am not a fucking libertarian, and yet as it seems always, so many people, just given the opportunity to stand by anything that they purport to believe, always fail to do so. What an embarrassment. And I have to say, Lauren, that should I attend another event where you are present, such as it was earlier this year in Philadelphia, I am going to ask you about this, should I recall. I'm not saying I won't forget. But given the opportunity, I am going to nail you on this position. Because you get on a stage and you blather on about freedom and liberty for hours on end. You have a podcast where that is all you fucking do. And then, given the opportunity to stand by those so-called principles, those supposed principles, you fail. But let's put aside that. Let's put aside Matt Walsh's hysteria. Let's put aside Andrew Torba's unceasing hysteria. And with Andrew, it's whatever at this point. Every once in a while, he just goes, he has a day of PMS. He melts down on Twitter. He blocks a bunch of people, and then he deletes all his tweets. This is fairly routine for him. So let's just put that aside. Who really cares? This is just standard operating procedure for him, where he embarrasses his entire company, his entire brand, and that I've already seen a couple videos so far of people calling him out. You guys are kind of late to the party, to be honest. I called this guy out when it was actually harder than it is now. I was the one that was saying that him banning Loli was wrong, and I was pretty much by myself at that point. But here he is, calling for not only the prohibition of pornography, but on a federal level, just jailing pornographers. And you can have whatever opinion you want to of porn and pornographers, but the fact is that just because you produce a certain kind of content, which is in its entirety voluntary, It is. You can tip your fedora for these loose women that star in these pieces of media. The fact is, they're agreeing to a contract. They're being paid for their work. There is very little difference between two stars in a movie making out and quasi-fucking, and you can watch, PG-13 in a theater, or them being fully nude and having sex. There is very little to distinguish those two. And the fact that you think that that's not true, that there is some sort of major distinction between the two, is unbelievable. It is you not only failing to understand the matter of not why, but how. And we're going to get to that in a second here. The how. That is the elephant in the room as it relates to this. Because the why is you bellyaching. What annoys me so much is the inability for supposedly intelligent people to understand the moral equivalence that exists between them and those on the left. The left cries about racism, cries about the minorities, and you cry about the children. You cry about women. Because, in all honesty, if you look at Jim Banks here, who is one of the people that really kicked this off with his fucking, people in the administration said that they were going to do something about the pornography, and they're not. Well, it's because it's an unenforceable standard. It's something you cannot possibly enforce. It is going to create a bureaucracy equivalent to that of Prohibition-era agents running around trying to ban something that a black market has sprung up overnight to produce. And, it's a demand to satisfy. Like then, you are going to be responsible for a bureaucracy that is going to be so impossible to actually execute that its downfall is inevitable. But for the sake of mentioning Jim Banks here, I'm going to point to his second tweet here, which, as always, tips that fucking fedora.
M'lady.
As always, whenever it comes to the right, as it relates to living by our standards of small government, as it relates to the issues of simply going after federal funding that is directly responsible for the source of civil unrest in America, rather than do any of that, we look to the state once again, and we look to the state and say, God, that is the state. Save society. Engineer society. The left says hate speech, and the left says racism, as the left says minorities. We say obscenity. We say children. We say women. We lecture and standardize using the exact same principles, under the exact same excuses, to the same end where the question of how is not. We can't. It's impossible. It will never happen. For the morons like Andrew Torba, the dishonest actors like Andrew Torba, this is not settled law. As much as you want to point to existing obscenity law that there is Supreme Court precedence for, this is a gray area by which there is no real standard that is in fact enforceable. Not just on the objective level of what is pornographic, what is obscene, and the absurd standard that the court has set. Not just that, but specifically the issue of what is in fact the law. If you look at the Supreme Court case that is now the set precedence, which other cases have been knocked down as a direct result of, this is precedence that the Supreme Court is acting upon, is operating based off of. Masterpiece Cake Shop is the standard, and the standard is, for better or worse, that you requiring certain services and you imposing upon certain businesses is equivalent to compelled speech and therefore a violation of the First Amendment. It isn't a matter just of, violation of religious liberty and the conscience as I as a religious person. It is specifically compelled speech. And so if baking a cake is a violation of First Amendment protections, why don't pornographers or artists or whoever, why don't they have First Amendment protections? Why not? When this is the most recent precedent set, How is it in any way less of a violation if the state demands that you not create something, that you censor whatever it is that you are producing? How is it in any way less of a violation when compared to a citizen? Isn't there more Supreme Court precedents that limits the actions of the state as it relates to the First Amendment? That seems to be my recollection of existing laws, whether it's video games, pornography, whatever it should be. Isn't the standard that has been set by the court more of a restriction based around state action than it is anything to do with citizens? And yet this is the existing precedent that the court is acting upon and has in several instances since its decision, which really wasn't that long ago. Was it this year or last year that this fucking thing was set? And yet several cases have come to the court where it has been knocked down and that this has been the precedent set. In what world is baking a cake free speech, but filming something isn't? Or drawing something, or photographing something? In what way is that not also speech? Is that not also a direct violation of one acting upon just something that they could otherwise do if it weren't for the state intervening? This is all voluntary. Everyone involved is being paid. The customer's paying the pornographer is paying the actors. In what way is this not something that naturally could be easily done by those acting freely if it weren't for the state intervening? There's a greater argument to say that this is natural law than there is to say that the state should interfere on this on any level. If you want to set some kind of regulation online that pornography websites must have some sort of age gate, by all means, fight that idiotic fight and see if you can even manage to get that by the court. But the fact that we're going as far as saying that we should ban it on a federal basis and prosecute pornographers is utterly absurd. This is something that not only can you not morally justify, it's something you can't possibly imagine you'll be ever able to enforce. It isn't just the ridiculous basis of the Miller Standard and obscenity law that exists currently of, well, if enough people declare that this to be obscene, then it is. That is utterly ridiculous and is not in any way an actionable standard. That is utterly ridiculous. Because that is simply the same moral standard of, well, if enough people think that this is hate speech, it is. If you don't believe that, then in what way should I be convinced that if 5 people think that some random image is pornographic, then, oh man, I should just fucking go to jail for it? It's ridiculous. This is so moronic. But let's forget about that. Let's forget about the standards that exist. Let's forget about the contradicting nature of the court and the existing precedents that's been set. Let's forget about all of that. Let's address the real issue here, which is how in the world are you actually going to implement this? How in the world are you actually going to pass legislation that is going to exist on a federal basis that bans the production of pornography in its entirety, and that you're somehow going to enforce that standard? Forgetting the fact of the matter of the instant black market, which will worsen the abuse of women, which will worsen the issue of human trafficking, which will worsen the issues of the downsides of pornography. If you look at the 20th century, and whether we're talking about alcohol, whether we're talking about any form of narcotic, regardless of what we're talking about as it relates to prohibition and the federal government, give me the example that shows that federal prohibition leads to a reduction in consumption. Show me that standard, because whether it's cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, or any other narcotic that you can, or any other vice that you can give me, show me the example that is not going to result in a massive black market and no reduction in consumption at all. But the cherry on top, The cherry on top of that is the fact that not only do you have to contend with the domestic production of porn, you have to deal with the foreign production of porn. And so as it relates to going online and consuming as much porn as you possibly ever could want to consume, how in the world are you going to prevent those from going online, accessing a foreign site, and jerking off? How are you going to prevent that? And I have the answer, because it's the only solution to that. It is Chinese-style censorship of the internet. It is you forcing every single website through some kind of government entity to censor any access possible to online pornography. It is you establishing Chinese-style censorship. To what end? Likely no end. And to that end, should that actually be your goal, to tackle online pornography, Chinese-style censorship of it, then you are in fact worse and more tyrannical than the SJWs. You are in fact more tyrannical than anyone on the left that isn't a self-avowed communist. And not the cringy anarcho kind, but the ones that in fact want to take control of the state and basically send us all to a gulag. In that way, you're not really morally distinct from them. You're not. You have basically turned the United States into a fascist state. In a similar fashion to the Chinese, where you have endless surveillance, you have multiple violations of several amendments to the Constitution, whether it's the 1st, 4th, 14th, I can continue. You will be responsible for the violation of rights of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. To what end? That is the question I offer to you. Is this the issue that you think we should shred the Constitution over? Fucking pornography. When to me, this is the most lame issue to tackle. All the things that we should be tackling, all the things that are directly leading to the destabilization of the United States and the radicalization of the young people. It isn't fucking porn. Absolutely nothing was done when Republicans controlled the keys to everything that is necessary to see something accomplished. Majority on the Supreme Court, House, Senate, White House. You had every fucking opportunity to tackle education, and you did fucking nothing. And here we are on Twitter hysterically screeching about pornography. Get fucked. The lot of you utterly unprincipled, hypocritical, hysterical fucking pea-brains. You are just lashing out at your own fucking impotence to see anything that you want done or changed actually done, actually accomplished. This is you lashing out and being utterly ridiculous for the sake of the fact that you are utterly incapable of doing anything in achieving the world you want to see. And so I'll end the video with this. As I said on Twitter, if you want to lose an election, this is the route to go. In the name of tipping your fedora once again towards women, which I'm just going to say I think is a major component to this, which is women who claim to be fucking as anarcho-capitalist as one can be, and yet at the drop of a hat say they want to prohibit something. Because ew. You know? So often as it is with women, I mean, 19th in question, honestly, as it relates to it. Maybe we can trick women in banning pornography, but also repealing the 19th Amendment. That'll be like a joint amendment that they'll mistakenly vote for out of hysteria. But in the name of tipping the fedora, are we really going to throw the next election? Because I gotta tell you, this is a losing issue. This is an issue by which you will lose, because this is unpopular. And more so, my issue with it is that this shows that all your rhetoric about freedom and liberty is fucking bullshit. When it comes to a massive multinational conglomerate fucking over the average man, freedom and liberty all day. But when it comes to someone making a film, someone drawing an image, someone taking a photo, for some reason, freedom and liberty and their constitutional protections go out the fucking window. One in which you can't explain, you cannot justify, you base on standards that are equivalent to those used by the left, which you claim to not believe in, which you are actively being censored by, and yet, for some reason, you turn around and endorse that standard. On top of that, as I've already stated, you have no means by which to enforce this that isn't a gross violation of multiple amendments, and also turning the United States into a Chinese-style fascist state in which we are all living under the tyranny of an ever-watching state. The only way in which you are ever going to enforce this is through sheer tyranny. Say whatever you want to about women and the children and so on, and the coomers. In the name of starting families and protecting children and tipping my fedora to the women, miladies, we're going to do something so tyrannical that it's going to result in a Democratic sweep. Wow, man, that's some 40 fucking chess, if I've ever seen it. And I'll just leave it there. Thanks for listening.